Okay, so next is the idea of William Harvey's studies. Now, you might remember William Harvey, at least the HL kids will. We talked about circulation. So he was one that showed that blood circulates around the heart. He discovered veins and arteries and kind of disproved the idea that blood was produced kind of in the lungs. He also did a lot of other stuff. He was actually pretty prolific. But one thing he did is he disproved Aristotle's soil and seed theory of reproduction. Okay, um, basically the idea with this theory was that male sperm, which were considered the seed, combines with the menstrual blood, the soil in this case, to form an egg. Then the egg develops into a fetus, and this is just using the information from the sperm alone. So it was a pretty male-centric view, but also with lack of microscopes and so forth. It was really hard to actually figure out what was actually going on. So that was kind of the theory at William Harvey's time. Um, so basically, what he did is he shot a bunch of deer to show that it wasn't true. Um, and a bit more specific than that, he would actually follow deer around. He was a king's physician in England, so he had access to the king's hunting reserves, which are these big wooded areas that only the king and whoever he invited could actually go there and hunt. It was actually, I think, a killable offense if anybody was caught poaching in the king's forest. So what Harvey would do is he'd hide in the woods basically and look for deer reproducing. He record the date when they reproduced. He would follow that deer around, and then he would shoot the female deer at different times, so 1 month, 2 months, etc. And he'd look for an embryo. Um, and basically, he didn't find anything until about 7 or 8 weeks after the mating. Um, so again, the idea was it was there was something there. Obviously, he just didn't have microscopes and access to the technology to actually see it. Had he had a technology, had he had a microscope, it might have been a much different story. Um, but what this did help to kind of figure out was he found that the menstrual blood had nothing to do with the development of the fetus. The fact that he couldn't find it then kind of meant, well, obviously menstrual blood couldn't have been a factor. Um, so I mean, he was correct in that way, though his reasoning was kind of wrong. Um, so even though um, he couldn't identify the correct mechanism of sexual reproduction, that didn't really start to be figured out till microscopes came along. And he incorrectly asserted that the fetus did not develop from the male and the female seeds, right? So he said it was something else was going on here. And this was simply because it took 7 or 8 weeks before he actually saw anything. Okay, so that kind of explains William Harvey. If you want to look at his work on circulation, I think I had a video on that also a little further back. Okay, thank you.